You have 48 hours to pay $2,400 in back dues, or we're putting a lien on this dump. Those were the first words out of Karen Pemberton's mouth when she showed up at my grandfather's 1962 cabin. This woman I'd never seen before was demanding money for land that existed decades before her HOA was even a dream. I told her my property was never part of any HOA. She waved some fake paperwork claiming otherwise. When I laughed and said, "Lady, you're crazy if you think I'm paying you a dime," her fake smile vanished. "We'll see about that," she hissed. 2 days later, 3 guys in work boots showed up at 10 p.m. claiming to be HOA security, demanding entry for a property inspection. The stench of cheap cologne and cigarettes filled my porch. I called my cousins. "We're rolling up now." The rumble of 3 Harleys echoed off the trees. Jake, Diesel, and Bear stepped off. Full Army veteran gear. Those fake security guys literally sprinted to their truck, gone in 30 seconds. What would you do? Ever watched bullies run? Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started. My name's Marcus Steele, and 6 months ago I was living in a cramped city apartment, working IT contracts and dreaming of something better. Then Grandpa Eugene passed away and left me his pride and joy, a 1960s log cabin on 2.5 acres of pure heaven. This wasn't just any property. Grandpa bought this land in 1962 for $800 when it was nothing but pine trees and a dirt road. He built that cabin with his own hands, board by board, stone by stone. The smell of cedar still lingered in every room, mixed with decades of wood smoke and the leather of his old recliner that creaked like a ship in a storm. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Well water, septic system, quarter-mile from the main road, complete independence. The morning mist would roll off the creek behind the cabin, and woodpeckers would drum on the old oak tree like nature's most persistent alarm clock. Then came Karen Pemberton, because apparently even paradise has snakes. Picture a woman in her early 50s who thinks a real estate license makes her royalty. Always dressed in what she calls business casual. Blazers that cost more than most people's rent, driving a white BMW that she parks like she owns the world. Her perfume could choke a horse and her smile could freeze hellfire. Karen lives in Willowbrook Estates, this collection of McMansions that sprouted up in 2018 like mushrooms after rain. 27 identical houses with yards so small you'd need a surveyor to find them. Every mailbox the same shade of beige, every lawn cut to regulation height because God forbid someone express individuality. She became HOA president the day after moving in naturally, you know the type, moves to a new place and immediately wants to redesign it in her own image. Here's the kicker. The original developer went bankrupt before finishing the promised amenities. No community pool, no clubhouse, no fancy entrance gates, just overpriced houses and a massive HOA debt. Karen's been scrambling to collect enough money to avoid complete financial collapse. That's when her greedy eyes landed on my property. See, my cabin sits on prime real estate. Mature trees, creek access, the kind of land that makes developers drool like hungry wolves. In Karen's twisted mind, if she could somehow claim my property belonged to her HOA, she'd solve all her financial problems. The crunch of her heels on my gravel driveway that first morning sounded like a death march for my peace and quiet. "Hi there, I'm Karen Pemberton, president of Willowbrook Estates HOA. We need to talk about bringing your property into compliance." I nearly choked on my coffee. The bitter taste matched my sudden mood perfectly. "Compliance with what?" That's when she pulled out her folder of lies. Doctored boundary maps, fake legal documents, the whole 9 yards. The papers rustled in the morning breeze like autumn leaves, except these were trying to steal my inheritance instead of just falling to the ground. "Ma'am," I said, setting down my mug with deliberate calm. "My grandfather bought this land in 1962. Your HOA didn't exist until 2018. I'm not part of your little kingdom." Her smile never wavered, but something cold and predatory flickered behind her eyes. "Oh, but you see, this property was always intended for inclusion. There seems to be some confusion about the boundaries." Then came the financial throat punch, $2,400 in back dues plus $180 monthly going forward. When I refused, she threatened liens, foreclosure, legal action, the whole intimidation playbook that bullies use when they think they've found an easy target. "You have 48 hours to reconsider," she said, those heels clicking back down my steps like a ticking time bomb. I'd hate for this to get unpleasant. I watched her BMW disappear down my gravel driveway, leaving nothing but dust and the lingering stench of her perfume mixed with my rising anger. What I didn't know was that Karen had just made the biggest miscalculation of her life. She'd mistaken a quiet veteran for an easy mark. Karen didn't waste time making good on her threats. 48 hours later, I woke up to find my property looking like a Christmas tree, if Christmas trees were decorated with bright orange violation notices instead of ornaments. She'd been busy. Every fence post, every tree near the driveway, even my mailbox, all sporting zip-tied notices fluttering in the morning breeze like surrender flags. The crinkle of paper echoed through the morning air as I tore them down one by one. I pulled one off and nearly laughed out loud. Violation, unapproved rustic structures. They were talking about my grandfather's hand-built cabin, the same cabin that had weathered 40 years of storms and housed 3 generations of my family. Another one, violation, non-conforming vegetation. Karen apparently had a problem with my oak trees. You know, the ones that were there when her parents were still in diapers. My personal favorite, violation, commercial vehicle on residential property. She was citing my work van, a plain white Ford that I use for IT service calls. Apparently having a job was against HOA regulations now, though I remembered reading somewhere that HOAs can't actually restrict work vehicles unless it's specifically written into the original covenants. The final notice announced a mandatory compliance inspection scheduled for the following Tuesday at 9 a.m. sharp. Karen would be arriving with her architectural review board to assess the full extent of my violations. Time for some research. I spent the next 6 hours at the county clerk's office, surrounded by dusty filing cabinets and the musty smell of old documents. The clerk, a friendly woman named Betty who'd worked there since the Carter administration, helped me dig through decades of property records. "Honey," she said, adjusting her reading glasses, "your grandfather's deed is crystal clear. This property was explicitly excluded from all development agreements. See this notation here? Parcel 47B reserved from subdivision. That means hands off." I photographed everything. The original 1962 deed, the 1985 boundary survey, the 2018 Willowbrook development plat that clearly showed my property as separate. Betty explained that once property boundaries are legally established and recorded, they can't be changed without the owner's written consent, something my grandfather never gave because he died before Willowbrook even existed. But Karen wasn't playing by legal rules. She escalated to social media warfare. That evening, while eating leftover pizza that tasted like cardboard thanks to my stress levels, I discovered her Facebook post. "Concerned about problem property affecting our beautiful neighborhood. Some people think rules don't apply to them. Property values matter. # Willowbrook states HOA property standards." The comments were pure gold. Half the neighbors defending Karen like she was leading a holy crusade, the other half asking what the hell she was talking about. One brave soul named Dolores Martinez commented, "Karen, that cabin was there before any of us. Maybe worry about your own property?" I screenshotted everything. My army training had taught me that documentation wins wars, whether you're fighting insurgents or suburban tyrants with too much time on their hands. Tuesday morning arrived with Karen's architectural review board, which turned out to be Karen, her husband Dale, who looked like he'd rather be getting a root canal, and some guy in a cheap suit who kept checking his phone like he was being held hostage. They marched around my property like generals inspecting battlefield damage. The smell of Karen's overpowering perfume mixed with morning dew created this sickly sweet fog that followed her everywhere. She dictated notes into her phone while pointing at perfectly normal things. Wood siding non-compliant with neighborhood standards. Gravel driveway creates dust issues. Fire pit represents safety hazard. That's when my neighbor Dolores appeared at my door. She was 68, built like a linebacker, and had the kind of weathered face that spoke of zero tolerance for nonsense. "Marcus, honey, I need to warn you about something," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Karen did this same thing to the Hendersons 2 years ago, elderly couple who lived here 30 years. She harassed them until they sold and moved to a retirement home. What was her angle? She filed complaint after complaint with the county, made their lives miserable with inspections, fines, legal threats. They couldn't afford to fight back. Dolores's voice hardened. "That woman's got a pattern. She targets people she thinks can't defend themselves." The pieces clicked into place. Karen wasn't just desperate for money. She was systematically driving out anyone who didn't fit her vision of the perfect neighborhood. I'd read about this tactic in a property law article once. It's called selective enforcement, where HOAs deliberately target specific homeowners to force them out. "There's more," Dolores continued. 3 other families have moved away in the past 2 years, all after Karen's special attention. She's like a cancer spreading through the community. That evening brought Karen's latest gift, a formal notice scheduling daily inspections until I came into full compliance. Daily. The audacity was breathtaking, and probably illegal, since property owners have rights against harassment even from HOAs. Karen had made one crucial mistake, though. I wasn't some helpless elderly couple or intimidated newcomer. I was a veteran who dealt with actual threats, not suburban wannabe dictators with clipboards and delusions of authority. Time to show her the difference between harassment and real warfare. Karen's next move came faster than I expected. 3 days after her little inspection theater, I got a surprise visit from the county code enforcement officer, a tired-looking guy named Rodriguez who apologized before he even introduced himself. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Steele. Got a complaint about unpermitted business operations and potential sewage violations. I have to follow up on everything that comes through the office." I handed him my permits, all current, all legitimate. He walked around the property, tested the septic system, checked my electrical work. The man was thorough, professional, and clearly annoyed at having his time wasted. "Everything's perfect," he said, scribbling notes on his clipboard. "Whoever filed this complaint either doesn't know what they're talking about or they're deliberately wasting county resources." The disgust in his voice was unmistakable. "Between you and me, this smells like retaliation." After he left, I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Martinez, no relation to my neighbor Dolores, came out that afternoon. He was a younger guy with the kind of steady demeanor that comes from dealing with petty complaints all day. "I can't arrest someone for filing false reports unless there's a clear pattern of malicious intent," he explained, the leather of his gun belt creaking as he shifted his weight. "But I can document this as harassment. Keep records of everything." That evening, I installed security cameras around the property. 4 high-definition units with night vision and cloud backup, the kind of setup that would make a surveillance expert proud. If Karen wanted to play games, I'd make sure every move was recorded. Good thing I did. 2 nights later, the cameras caught something interesting. Around 2 a.m., footprints appeared in the soft dirt around my cabin's foundation. Someone had been walking the perimeter, testing windows, checking door locks. The motion sensors picked up movement, but whoever it was stayed just outside the camera angles, like they knew where the blind spots were. I'd learned about this kind of reconnaissance in the military. Someone was gathering intelligence, looking for vulnerabilities. The bitter taste of adrenaline filled my mouth as I realized Karen's escalation was getting serious. But she wasn't done yet. The next morning brought a new nightmare. My internet service was mysteriously disconnected due to unpaid bills. Funny thing was, my bills were automatically paid and current. It took 6 hours on the phone with 3 different customer service representatives to get it restored. "Sorry for the confusion, sir," the technician said when he came out to reconnect everything. "Someone called claiming to be you and requested service termination. Happens more often than you'd think, usually domestic disputes or neighbor conflicts." That afternoon, my landline went dead. The phone company claimed a routine tree trimming operation had accidentally cut the wrong lines. The crew that did the work? Local guys who did landscaping for several Willowbrook Estates residents. I was starting to see the pattern. Karen was systematically cutting my connections to the outside world, trying to isolate me. Classic psychological warfare. Make the target feel alone and vulnerable. Time for my counterattack. I'd been researching Karen's background, and I found something interesting buried in public records. Her real estate license had been flagged for investigation twice in the past 5 years, both times for misrepresenting property boundaries in sales transactions. Nothing had stuck, but the pattern was there. More digging revealed that Karen had been involved in 3 previous HOA disputes at her former residence. Each time she'd positioned herself as the defender of property values, while quietly maneuvering to gain control or force out opponents. But the real goldmine came from the county assessor's website. Karen's own property had some interesting irregularities. Her lot size on the tax records didn't match the actual surveyed boundaries. Either she'd made a mistake when buying, or she'd been playing fast and loose with property lines for years. I printed everything and filed it away. Every good veteran knows you don't show your hand until you're ready to play your best cards. Meanwhile, Karen was rallying her troops. She scheduled an emergency HOA meeting to discuss the ongoing security threat posed by my property. The agenda, posted on the community Facebook page, was a masterpiece of fear-mongering. Dangerous elements, property value deterioration, community safety concerns. She was painting me as some kind of terrorist threat because I refused to pay her extortion money. My neighbor Dolores knocked on my door that evening, bringing homemade cookies that smelled like heaven and news that tasted like vinegar. "The meeting's tomorrow night," she said, settling into my grandfather's old porch chair with a weary sigh. "Karen's got people scared, talking about your military background like you're some kind of ticking time bomb." What are people saying? Mixed bag. Some folks are buying her nonsense, especially the newer residents who don't know better. But others remember the Hendersons and how Karen drove them out. There's starting to be pushback. That night, as I sat on my porch listening to the distant rumble of traffic on the main road, I realized Karen had made a crucial error. She was so focused on portraying me as a threat that she'd forgotten something important. This community had other people who remembered what life was like before her reign of terror. The resistance was forming, and Karen didn't even know it yet. Karen's emergency HOA meeting was a circus, and she was the ringmaster. 23 residents packed into the community center that reeked of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Karen had prepared a PowerPoint presentation because nothing says legitimate concern like pie charts about property values. She'd done her homework. Photos of my cabin from every unflattering angle, making it look like some kind of survivalist compound. Charts showing property values in other neighborhoods where non-conforming structures had allegedly caused market decline. Even a printed timeline of my escalating aggressive behavior, which apparently included the crime of refusing to pay her fake fees. This individual has shown complete disregard for community standards, Karen announced, clicking through slides with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. His military background raises serious concerns about his stability and potential for violence. I sat in the back, recording everything on my phone. Amazing how quickly "thank you for your service" becomes "dangerous veteran" when it suits someone's agenda. But Karen's masterstroke was bringing in her brother-in-law, City Councilman Richard Pemberton. Apparently, being married to Karen's sister qualified him as an expert on neighborhood safety. He nodded gravely at every word, lending official weight to her performance. "The city takes these concerns very seriously," he intoned, adjusting his tie like he was addressing Congress instead of 24 suburbanites. "We'll be conducting a thorough investigation into any permit violations or safety hazards." 3 residents spoke in my defense: Dolores, Earl from the hardware store, and surprisingly Dale Pemberton, Karen's own husband. Poor Dale looked like a man who'd been hostage so long he'd forgotten what freedom tasted like. "Maybe we should hear his side before making any decisions," Dale suggested quietly, earning a glare from his wife that could have frozen hellfire. But Karen had the majority. The vote was 18-5 to pursue all legal remedies against my property: translation, lawsuits, harassment, and whatever other weapons she could deploy. That's when the lawyers got involved. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from Whitman Pearson Associates, one of those law firms that charges by the syllable. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, demanding I cease and desist from diminishing property values through non-conforming land use. They wanted $15,000 in damages for alleged aesthetic harm to the neighborhood, plus immediate compliance with all HOA regulations. The kicker? I had 10 days to respond or face aggressive litigation. I called Veterans Legal Aid immediately. The intake specialist, a woman named Sarah, who sounded like she'd heard this story before, transferred me to their property rights attorney. "Mr. Steele, I've reviewed your documents," Attorney Jennifer Walsh said during our phone consultation. "Not only does this HOA have zero legal standing, but their actions constitute harassment under state law. They're essentially trying to steal your property through intimidation." She explained something called adverse possession, where someone can claim ownership of land they don't legally own by occupying it openly for a specific period. But that didn't apply here since my ownership was clear and recorded. What Karen was attempting was more like adverse paperwork, using fake legal documents to create the illusion of authority. The real legal weapon in my arsenal was something called a quiet title action, a court procedure that definitively establishes property ownership when there's a dispute. It would cost me about $3,000, but it would permanently end Karen's claims and expose her fraudulent paperwork in open court. But Karen wasn't done escalating. She filed a police report claiming I'd been conducting suspicious activities at my property. According to her statement, I'd been seen making modifications to structures and hosting unusual gatherings, apparently referring to the time Earl and 2 other neighbors helped me repair my roof. Deputy Martinez came out again, this time with his partner. They looked embarrassed as they explained the complaint. "Ma'am filed a report about potential illegal construction and suspicious persons," Martinez said, his radio crackling with distant dispatcher chatter. "We have to follow up, but honestly, this looks like neighbor harassment to me." His partner, a veteran himself, was less diplomatic. "Some people got too much time on their hands. You keep documenting everything. This pattern's getting pretty clear." That evening, as I sat reviewing Karen's escalating attacks, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Marcus, this is your cousin Jake. Diesel gave me your number. Heard you're having some trouble with local bullies." Jake, Diesel, and Bear, my 3 Army cousins who ran a motorcycle repair shop 2 states over. We'd served together in Afghanistan, the kind of men who'd drop everything to help family. Just hearing Jake's gravelly voice made some of the tension leave my shoulders. "It's getting ugly, Jake. This woman's trying to steal my property through legal harassment." "Say no more, cuz." "We'll be there this weekend." Time someone reminded these suburban warriors what real men look like. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Karen had been escalating because she thought I was isolated and vulnerable. She was about to learn that veterans take care of their own, And 3 Harley-riding army mechanics were exactly the kind of backup that turns bullies into cowards. While waiting for my cousins to arrive, I decided to dig deeper into Karen's background. Something about her desperation felt personal, like she had more at stake than just HOA finances. I spent Friday evening at the county records office, armed with Betty's directions to the more obscure filing cabinets. That's when I struck gold. Karen's property purchase from 2018 contained some very interesting details. According to the official survey, her lot was supposed to be 0.7 acres. But when I cross-referenced it with the county's digital mapping system, something didn't add up. Her actual property, including that fancy pool and deck she was so proud of, extended well beyond her legal boundaries. I pulled the original plat map for Willowbrook Estates and compared it to recent satellite photos. The discrepancy was glaring. Karen's backyard encroached on a 0.3-acre strip of public easement that was supposed to remain accessible for utility maintenance and emergency vehicle access. Betty whistled low when I showed her the evidence. "Honey, this woman's been living on county land for 5 years without permission. That's not just a mistake, that's straight-up theft." The financial implications were staggering. According to county records, easement violations carried penalties of $200 per day from the date of encroachment. Karen owed the county approximately $365,000 in unpaid fees and penalties. Her pool alone was built entirely on public land. But it got worse. The county had sent multiple notices to the address on file, but Karen had never updated her information with the assessor's office. All the violation notices had been going to her previous address across town, meaning she either genuinely didn't know about the problem or she'd been deliberately avoiding the mail. I photographed everything: the original survey, the current satellite images, the outstanding violation notices, the penalty calculations. This wasn't just about my property anymore. Karen was potentially facing foreclosure herself. Now her desperation made perfect sense. She needed HOA money, not just for community amenities, but to pay her own mounting legal bills. My $180 monthly dues were a drop in the bucket compared to her 6-figure county debt, but every dollar counted when you're drowning. The irony was delicious. Karen had been terrorizing me about property compliance while she herself was the neighborhood's biggest violator. Her threats about liens and foreclosure weren't just harassment, they were projection. She was facing the exact same financial destruction she'd been threatening me with. I also discovered why she'd been so aggressive about targeting longtime residents. 3 of the families she'd driven out had properties that bordered the disputed easement. If anyone had researched the actual property boundaries, they might have noticed that Karen's lot didn't match the official records. By forcing out observant neighbors and replacing them with newcomers who trusted her expertise, Karen had been systematically eliminating anyone who might discover her secret. It was a brilliant strategy. Corrupt, illegal, and ultimately doomed, but brilliant nonetheless. The evidence painted a clear picture. Karen Pemberton wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a desperate woman trying to cover up her own massive legal violations by bullying others into submission. Every aggressive move she'd made against me was really a defensive action to protect her own fraudulent land grab. Saturday morning brought the rumble of salvation. 3 Harley-Davidsons rolled up my driveway like thunder announcing a storm. Jake, Diesel, and Bear dismounted with the easy confidence of men who'd faced real enemies and weren't impressed by suburban tyrants. "So this is the paradise some HOA queen's trying to steal," Jake said, pulling off his helmet to reveal the same steel-gray eyes that had intimidated insurgents in Kandahar. "Nice place, cuz. Shame it comes with a pest problem." I handed him the folder containing all of Karen's violations. "Boys, let me tell you about our friend Karen's little secret. Turns out she's been stealing county land for 5 years, and we're going to use that information to end this war once and for all." The hunt was about to become the hunted. That weekend became a war council disguised as a family barbecue. Jake fired up my grandfather's old grill, while Diesel and Bear spread county documents across my kitchen table like battle maps. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid mixed with the musty scent of legal paperwork, the perfect combination of comfort food and righteous anger. "Here's what we're dealing with," I explained, pointing to the property surveys. "Karen's been living on stolen county land for 5 years. She owes nearly $400,000 in violations and penalties, which explains why she's so desperate to grab my property and expand her HOA income." Bear, our logistics expert who'd coordinated supply lines through Afghan mountains, studied the financial documents with the intensity he once reserved for enemy troop movements. "This woman's not just broke, she's catastrophically underwater. Her house is probably mortgaged to the hilt, and the county's going to come calling eventually." Diesel, whose military police background had taught him about evidence collection, was already organizing everything into chronological order. "We've got her cold on the land theft. but we need to be smart about how we use this information. Drop it too early and she'll lawyer up and disappear. Wait too long and she might skip town. Jake flipped stakes while outlining our strategy. First rule of psychological warfare: let the enemy defeat themselves. Karen's been escalating because she thinks she's winning. We need to give her enough rope to hang herself. Our plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of confronting Karen directly with her violations, we'd file the evidence with the county and let the bureaucratic wheels start turning. Meanwhile, I'd pursue my own legal remedies, the quiet title action that would permanently establish my property ownership. There's something called a lis pendens we can file, I explained, remembering Jennifer Walsh's advice. It's basically a public notice that prevents someone from selling property during a legal dispute. Once that's on Karen's house, she can't refinance or sell to cover her county debt. Diesel grinned like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. Beautiful. She'll be trapped with a house she can't sell and debts she can't pay. But we needed community support to make this work. That's where Dolores became our secret weapon. Over pulled pork sandwiches and cold beer, she briefed us on neighborhood dynamics. Karen's got maybe 8 diehard supporters, she said, keeping her voice low even though we were alone on my property. But there are 15 families who've been quietly suffering under her reign. They're scared to speak up because they've seen what happened to the Hendersons and others. What would it take to get them organized? Bear asked. Proof that Karen's not invincible. Show them she's vulnerable and they'll find their courage. We decided to start with documentation. Every interaction with Karen would be recorded, legally, since we lived in a one-party consent state. Security cameras would capture any trespassing or harassment. Social media posts would be screenshotted and preserved. Jake, who'd learned about surveillance equipment during his demolitions training, helped me upgrade my security system. Military-grade motion sensors, infrared cameras, and cloud backup that updates in real time. If Karen so much as breathes on your property, we'll have evidence. Sunday afternoon brought our first test. Karen drove by 3 times in 2 hours, slowing down each time to stare at the Harleys parked in my driveway. On the 3rd pass, she stopped and took photos with her phone, probably planning to file another complaint about motorcycle gang activity or some similar nonsense. Look at her, Diesel laughed, watching from the kitchen window. Woman's so nervous she can barely hold her phone steady. She knows something's changed, but she doesn't know what. That evening, we established our communication network. The 3 cousins would take turns visiting on weekends, maintaining a visible presence that reminded Karen she was no longer dealing with an isolated target. Local supporters like Dolores, Earl, and Dale would keep us informed about HOA politics and Karen's mood. Information warfare, Jake explained while cleaning his tools. In Afghanistan, we learned that controlling the narrative is just as important as controlling the ground. Karen's been telling everyone you're the problem. Time to show them who the real threat is. Monday morning, I filed the quiet title action with the county courthouse. The clerk stamped my paperwork with the kind of finality that Karen's fake documents would never have. Cost, $3,000. Satisfaction of watching Karen's legal foundation crumble, priceless. Tuesday, I submitted Karen's property violations to the county code enforcement office, along with my detailed documentation of her harassment campaign. The intake officer, a no-nonsense woman who'd clearly seen this pattern before, assured me that an investigation would begin immediately. Property theft is a serious matter, she said, reviewing the survey discrepancies. We'll have someone out there by Friday to verify these boundary issues. By Wednesday, the legal machinery was in motion. Karen had no idea that her 5-year house of cards was about to collapse, bringing down not just her property but her entire campaign of intimidation. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and she wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. Karen's desperation hit a new level when she realized the cavalry had arrived. The sight of 3 Harleys in my driveway every weekend sent her into overdrive, and her tactics shifted from harassment to outright sabotage. It started with my internet service getting mysteriously disconnected again, this time with a story about unpaid bills stretching back 6 months. The customer service rep sounded genuinely confused when I showed him my bank statements proving automatic payments. Sir, someone called claiming to be you and said you were moving out of state. They requested immediate service termination and account closure. He scratched his head while staring at his computer screen. But your payment history shows no problems whatsoever. This is unusual. 2 days later, my electricity got shut off. Then my water service received a contamination report that triggered a mandatory inspection and temporary shutoff. Each time I had to spend hours on the phone and provide documentation to restore services that should never have been interrupted. The pattern was clear. Karen was systematically trying to make my property unlivable. If she couldn't force me out through legal threats, she'd make staying so miserable that I'd leave voluntarily. But her biggest mistake was targeting my livelihood. 3 of my regular IT clients received anonymous calls claiming I was under investigation for fraud and suggesting they find alternative service providers. One client, a small business owner named Thompson, called to warn me. Marcus, I got the weirdest call yesterday. Some woman claiming to be from a business standards organization said you were involved in some kind of scam. I told her she was nuts, but thought you should know. The taste of rage filled my mouth like copper pennies. Attacking my property was one thing, but going after my income crossed a line that even desperate people shouldn't cross. I immediately called Jennifer Walsh, my attorney. This is entering criminal territory, she said after I explained the latest escalation. Interfering with someone's business relationships through false statements can be prosecuted as defamation and intentional interference with contract. Document everything. That evening, Karen escalated to physical intimidation. Around 9 p.m., a truck drove slowly past my cabin 3 times, spotlights searching my property like I was some kind of fugitive. The 4th pass, they stopped and sat there idling for 20 minutes, engine rumbling like a mechanical threat. My security cameras caught everything in crystal clear detail. License plate, truck model, even the faces of the 2 men inside. A quick online search revealed the vehicle belonged to Karen's landscaping company, the same crew she'd used as fake HOA security. I called Deputy Martinez. They're not technically trespassing since they're on the public road, he explained, but this is clearly harassment. I'll have a patrol car swing by more frequently, and I'm adding this to your documentation file. But Karen's nuclear option was still coming. The next morning brought a knock from a federal investigator, a serious woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as Agent Sarah Reese from the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General. Mr. Steele, we've received allegations that you may be fraudulently claiming disability benefits while operating a lucrative business from an undisclosed luxury property. I need to ask you some questions. My blood pressure spiked so fast I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Someone had reported me for disability fraud, one of the most serious accusations a veteran can face. The penalties included prison time and forfeiture of all benefits. Agent Reese, I've been completely honest about my income and living situation. My disability rating is legitimate, and my business earnings have been properly reported to the IRS. She spent 2 hours reviewing my financial records, medical documentation, and business licenses. The smell of her coffee mixed with my nervous sweat as she methodically verified every detail of my life. Mr. Steele, whoever filed this complaint either has a serious misunderstanding of disability law or they're deliberately wasting federal resources. Your situation is completely legitimate. Her expression hardened. Filing false reports to federal agencies is a felony. Do you have any idea who might want to cause you this kind of trouble? I handed her the folder documenting Karen's harassment campaign. Agent Reese's eyebrows rose as she read through the timeline of escalating attacks. This is a clear pattern of retaliation and harassment. I'm going to recommend that our office investigate whoever filed this false report. Making fraudulent accusations against veterans is something we take very seriously. That afternoon, Jake called with news that made my day brighter. Because we've been asking around about your Karen problem. Turns out she's got a reputation in the veterans community. 3 other vets in different neighborhoods have complained about her targeting them specifically. Word's getting out and people are pissed. What kind of people? The kind who ride motorcycles and don't appreciate bullies who attack disabled veterans. His voice carried the promise of consequences. Let's just say Karen's about to discover that the veteran community looks after its own. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple, I realized Karen had made her biggest mistake yet. By attacking my military service and disability status, she'd crossed from neighborhood harassment into something much more serious. She'd picked a fight with the entire veteran community, and they were starting to notice. Karen's final desperate gambit arrived, disguised as professional help. She hired a private investigator, a sleazy-looking guy in a wrinkled suit who spent 3 days parked across from my property, taking photos and making notes like he was building a case for the FBI. His name was Doug Kramer, according to the business card he accidentally dropped in Earl's hardware store parking lot. Earl, bless him, picked it up and brought it straight to me. A quick online search revealed that Kramer specialized in domestic surveillance and asset investigation, the kind of PI who takes money from bitter ex-spouses and paranoid business partners. He's been asking questions around town, Dolores reported during one of our evening strategy sessions, wanting to know about your finances, your military service, whether you have any criminal history. Real subtle, like a bull in a china shop. But Karen's investigation backfired spectacularly. Instead of finding dirt on me, Kramer's questions reminded people about Karen's own questionable behavior. Several neighbors started asking why she was so obsessed with one property owner, and why she was spending HOA money on private investigators instead of community improvements. Her next move was even more desperate. Karen organized a citizens' safety patrol to monitor my property for suspicious activity. 5 volunteers in reflective vests would take shifts driving past my cabin, supposedly watching for code violations and dangerous behavior. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The woman who'd been trespassing, harassing, and filing false reports was now positioning herself as the neighborhood's protector against my alleged threat to public safety. Thursday evening brought the moment I'd been waiting for. County Code Enforcement Officer Rodriguez returned with a surveyor and a very official-looking clipboard. They spent 4 hours measuring Karen's property boundaries with laser precision equipment, their voices carrying across the evening air as they discussed significant discrepancies and unauthorized structures. From my porch, I watched Karen pace behind her sliding glass door like a caged animal. She knew something was wrong but couldn't figure out what. Her pool deck, the pride of her backyard entertaining space, was entirely on county land, along with her fancy gazebo and half her landscaping. Friday morning delivered the crushing blow. A large yellow notice appeared on Karen's front door. Stop work order. Unauthorized use of public easement. The county had officially shut down any improvements to her property and demanded immediate removal of all structures built on public land. The notice was visible from the street, which meant every neighbor driving past could see that the woman who'd been lecturing everyone about compliance was herself a major violator. The smell of Karen's humiliation seemed to drift through the air like smoke from a house fire. But rather than accept defeat, Karen doubled down with a move so outrageous it left me speechless. She called a press conference. Local news crews actually showed up. Apparently slow news days make HOA disputes seem newsworthy. Karen positioned herself in front of her Willowbrook Estate sign, speaking into microphones with the confidence of someone who'd completely lost touch with reality. "This is about property rights and community standards," she declared, her voice quavering with artificial emotion. "Veterans deserve our respect, but they shouldn't be above the law. This individual has turned our peaceful neighborhood into a war zone with his intimidation tactics and biker gang associates." The reporter, a young woman who clearly hadn't done her homework, ate it up. "What specific threats have you received, Mrs. Pemberton?" "Motorcycles roaring through our streets at all hours. Strange men conducting surveillance. My family doesn't feel safe in our own home." Karen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed the tears were more crocodile than genuine. But karma has a sense of timing. Right in the middle of Karen's performance, a county truck pulled up with code enforcement blazoned on the side. Officer Rodriguez climbed out with a stack of violation notices thicker than a phone book. "Mrs. Pemberton, I need to serve you with these citations for unauthorized construction on public easement. You have 30 days to remove all structures or face daily fines of $500. The cameras captured everything. Karen's face went from martyred victim to deer in headlights in about 3 seconds. The reporter's expression shifted from sympathetic to predatory as she realized the story had just taken an unexpected turn. "Ma'am, are you saying the county is wrong about these violations?" the reporter pressed, suddenly much more interested in facts than feelings. "No comment," Karen stammered, practically fleeing toward her house while Rodriguez continued reading her rights regarding the easement violations. That evening, Jake called with the news I'd been hoping to hear. "'Cause you're not going to believe this. Word about Karen's anti-veteran harassment has reached some people who don't appreciate that kind of behavior. Tomorrow's Saturday, and we're organizing a little community support ride." "How little?" "Oh, about 50 bikes worth of little. Time to show this neighborhood what real community solidarity looks like." Saturday morning, I woke to the distant rumble of approaching thunder. Karen's war against one veteran was about to become a confrontation with dozens of them, and her small army of suburban supporters was about to meet people who'd faced actual combat. The final battle was coming, and Karen had no idea how badly she'd miscalculated her enemy. Saturday arrived with the rumble of justice rolling down every street in Willowbrook Estates. 53 Harley-Davidsons formed a convoy that stretched 3 blocks, each bike carrying a veteran who'd heard about Karen's campaign against military families. The sound was like controlled thunder, echoing off the McMansions and rattling windows in their perfectly uniform frames. Karen had scheduled her emergency community safety meeting for 2 p.m. at the community center, expecting to rally support for her final push against my property. What she got instead was a parking lot full of American flags, leather jackets, and the kind of men and women who don't back down from bullies. I walked into that meeting carrying a folder that would end Karen's reign of terror forever. The community center reeked of nervous sweat and cheap coffee, packed with twice as many people as it was designed to hold. Karen stood at the front with her PowerPoint projector, but her usual confidence had evaporated like morning dew. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice shakier than autumn leaves, we're here to address the ongoing security threat posed by certain elements in our community. That's when I stood up. Karen, before you continue with your presentation, I think the community deserves to know some facts about property violations and theft. The room went dead silent. Karen's face turned the color of spoiled milk as I walked to the front, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor like a countdown timer. 5 years ago, when you bought your house, you apparently had some confusion about where your property lines actually ended. I connected my laptop to the projector, replacing her fear-mongering slides with county survey maps. According to these official documents, your pool, deck, and gazebo are built entirely on stolen county land. The gasps from the audience sounded like air being sucked out of the room. Karen tried to interrupt, but I kept going. The county assessor's office confirms that you owe $367,000 in easement violation penalties. That's why you've been so desperate to expand HOA membership and collect fees. You need money to cover your own massive legal debts. I clicked to the next slide, a timeline of Karen's harassment campaign. Every threat, every false police report, every attempt to destroy my livelihood, all documented and recorded. You've spent months accusing me of being a threat to this community while you've been the one stealing public land and terrorizing your neighbors. Karen finally found her voice. This is a setup. He's been planning this attack. That's when Deputy Martinez stood up from the back of the room. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. We have warrants for your arrest on charges of filing false police reports, harassment, and fraud. The room exploded. Half the people started cheering, while Karen's remaining supporters looked like they'd been slapped with reality. But the real shock came when Agent Reese from the VA stepped forward. Mrs. Pemberton, you're also facing federal charges for filing fraudulent reports against a disabled veteran. Making false accusations to federal agencies carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. Karen's legs gave out. She collapsed into a folding chair, her face cycling through denial, anger, and finally, the hollow stare of someone whose entire world was crumbling in real time. But I wasn't done yet. There's one more thing this community needs to know, I announced, pulling out the final document. The county has completed its investigation into Karen's property theft. Her house is being placed under immediate lien for the violation penalties. She can't sell, refinance, or transfer ownership until the debt is paid. Dolores stood up from the middle of the crowd, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd watched this nightmare unfold for years. I move that we vote to immediately remove Karen Pemberton as HOA president and dissolve this association entirely. We were fine before her development showed up, and we'll be fine after she's gone. The vote was unanimous among actual residents, 27-0, with Karen abstaining since she was being led away in handcuffs. As Deputy Martinez read Karen her rights, she turned to me with the kind of desperate anger that comes from complete defeat. You think you've won? I'll fight this in court. I'll appeal everything. You haven't seen the last of me. I looked her straight in the eyes, surrounded by 53 veterans who'd driven hundreds of miles to support a brother in arms. Karen, you picked a fight with the wrong family. We protect our own, and we never forget. The sound of her heels clicking across the floor for the last time was music to my ears. As the community center emptied, neighbors who'd been silent for months approached to apologize and offer support. The smell of freedom mixed with motorcycle exhaust as people filed out into the afternoon sunshine. Earl clapped me on the shoulder, grinning like a man who'd just watched justice served with a side of poetic irony. Marcus, I think this calls for a celebration. First round's on me. Outside, 53 Harleys fired up in sequence, creating a victory symphony that echoed through Willowbrook Estates like a freedom song. Karen's reign of terror was over, but the community she'd tried to destroy was just beginning to heal. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my grandfather's porch watching the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. The oak trees are budding with spring growth, and the sweet scent of honeysuckle mingles with the sound of children playing where Karen's house used to stand. That's right, the county seized her property for unpaid violations, and after a quick auction, it became Willowbrook Community Park. Karen got 18 months in federal prison plus restitution to the county and a personal settlement to me for $125,000. Turns out attacking disabled veterans is something federal judges take very seriously. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and she's banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The taste of victory never gets old. The HOA was officially dissolved 3 weeks after Karen's arrest. Those overpriced McMansions are still there, but now the residents actually talk to each other instead of hiding behind regulations and violation notices. Dale Pemberton, freed from his wife's reign of terror, turned out to be a decent guy who makes excellent barbecue and tells the funniest stories about surviving marriage to a suburban dictator. Our monthly freedom barbecues started as a joke but became the neighborhood's favorite tradition. Every first Saturday, we gather at my cabin for food, music, and the kind of community Karen tried so hard to destroy. The smell of charcoal and the sound of genuine laughter have replaced her fake perfume and threats. Dolores appointed herself my unofficial grandmother and brings homemade cookies that could end world hunger. The veteran motorcycle group that showed up for my support became a permanent fixture. They organize community security patrols that actually help people instead of intimidating them, and their charity poker runs have raised over $30,000 for local families in need. The rumble of their bikes on Saturday mornings sounds like freedom itself, but the real victory was what we built from Karen's settlement money. The Grandfather Eugene Memorial Scholarship provides college funding for children of disabled veterans. 8 kids got full rides this year, including little Maria Martinez, Dolores' granddaughter who wants to be a lawyer so she can fight bullies like Grandpa Marcus did. The former Karen property became a wildlife preserve and community garden. Kids fish in the creek that runs behind my cabin, their excited shouts echoing through the trees. Families have picnics where her stolen pool used to be, and the gazebo she built on county land was converted into a veterans memorial. Even her BMW's old parking spot is now home to a little free library that actually gets used. My IT business exploded after the story went viral. Turns out people love hiring the guy who took down an HOA tyrant, and I've gotten contracts from veterans organizations across 3 states. The best part? I can work from my grandfather's cabin while listening to the sounds of a community that finally knows what freedom feels like. Jake, Diesel, and Bear still visit every few months, and their motorcycle repair shop is booming with business from grateful veterans who heard about their support during my fight. They've started a nonprofit that helps veterans facing HOA harassment. Apparently, Karen wasn't the only suburban tyrant targeting military families. The county changed its laws because of our case. There's now a mandatory boundary verification process for all HOA formations, and property owners have stronger protections against harassment. 3 other communities have used our legal precedent to fight similar HOA corruption. Dale Pemberton married Dolores last month. Best wedding I've ever attended, held right here on my property under the same oak trees Karen wanted to cut down. Watching them dance to country music while 50 Harleys provided the evening soundtrack was proof that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. As I finish this story, the evening air carries the smell of Earl's barbecue starting up for tonight's community dinner. The sound of genuine laughter drifts through the pine trees, and I can see kids building a fort where Karen's violation notices used to flutter like surrender flags. The crunch of gravel under happy feet has replaced the click of her intimidating heels. My grandfather would be proud. His little cabin didn't just survive, it became the heart of something beautiful, something Karen's greed and hatred could never destroy. You know what the real lesson is here? Bullies only win when good people stay silent. But when communities stand together, when veterans support their own, and when truth finally sees daylight, even the most powerful tyrants crumble like houses of cards. Got an HOA nightmare of your own? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and you never know when your community might need its own freedom ride. Don't forget to subscribe to Karen Stories for more tales about ordinary people defeating extraordinary bullies. Next week, I'm sharing how an HOA tried to foreclose on a Gold Star mother's home. You won't believe how that battle ended.